On April 13, 1919, the dry red soil of a garden in Amritsar became the repository for a betrayal. It is a place where, if you hold the earth today, you can still feel the weight of what happened in 10 minutes of gunfire. To understand the violence, we have to look back at the trenches of the First World War. Hundreds of thousands of Indian soldiers had bled in European mud to protect the British crown. They fought with a persistent expectation that this massive show of loyalty would be rewarded with a clear path toward self-governance. Instead of freedom, they received the Rowlatt Act. Passed in 1919, this law made wartime emergency powers permanent. It granted colonial police the authority to arrest any Indian without a warrant and detain them indefinitely without ever seeing a courtroom. The law was summarized by a chilling warning that spread across the country: na dalil, na vakil, na appeal. No arguments, no lawyers, no appeals. The British government had effectively tightened a legislative noose around the neck of their most loyal subjects. The hard-earned trust of the war years was gone, replaced by a surge of nationwide fury. By early April, Amritsar was on the edge. The urban density made every protest feel massive, and every police movement feel like an invasion. During the festival of Ram Navami on April 9th, the colonial administration witnessed its greatest fear: Hindus and Muslims marching together, even sharing water from the same cups. For a power that relied on communal division to rule, this unprecedented unity suggested the empire was losing its grip. The British response was swift and provocative. They arrested two popular leaders, Dr. Satyapal and Dr. Kitchlew, and spirited them away. When a crowd gathered to demand their return, police opened fire. The streets descended into chaos as mobs retaliated, burning colonial banks and attacking a British missionary. The administration's focus shifted from restoring order to extracting vengeance. To the colonial commanders, an Indian hand striking a white official was a challenge to the racial hierarchy of the empire, and they intended to answer it with a lesson no one would survive. April 13th was Baisakhi, a major harvest festival. Thousands of farmers and families traveled from rural villages into Amritsar to visit the Golden Temple. Many wandered into the nearby Jallianwala Bagh to rest and celebrate, unaware that the city had been placed under a military ban on public gatherings. Jallianwala Bagh wasn't a park, it was a geographical trap. 6.5 acres were entirely enclosed by high brick walls in the backs of houses. There was only one narrow entrance. At 5:15 p.m., General Dyer arrived with 90 soldiers. Leaving his armored cars outside, he marched his men into the bog and immediately blocked the only exit. Dyer gave no order to disperse. He issued no warning. By intentionally sealing the only way out, he transformed the gathering into an inescapable slaughterhouse. The violence began without a word. On Dyer's command, the soldiers knelt and opened fire directly into the thickest parts of the unarmed crowd. Dyer monitored the firing personally, directing his troops to aim at the people desperately trying to scale the 10-foot walls. Men were shot off the bricks as they climbed, falling back into a growing pile of bodies. In the center of the bog stood a solitary well. Hundreds of people threw themselves into the water to escape the bullets, only to be crushed or drowned by those jumping in after them. When the well was eventually cleared, it held 120 bodies. For 10 continuous minutes, the soldiers fired 1,650 rounds of ammunition. They stopped only when their supplies were nearly exhausted. Dyer then marched his men out, leaving the dead and wounded where they lay. He immediately cut off the city's water and power and imposed a strict shoot-on-sight curfew, ensuring that no one could bring medical aid to the thousands bleeding in the dirt. The deliberate lack of warning, the blocked exits, and the targeted fire all served a singular colonial objective: to use absolute terror to paralyze the nation's spirit. During the subsequent Hunter Commission inquiry, Dyer showed no regret. He stated clearly that he could have dispersed the crowd without firing, but he chose to shoot because he wanted to exert a moral effect on the people of Punjab. The final break between India and the Crown came when Dyer returned to England. Instead of being punished, he was hailed as the savior of the Punjab. Supporters raised £26,000 for him and presented him with a Sword of Honor. This celebration of a massacre disgusted India's most respected figures. Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore renounced his British knighthood, writing to the viceroy that titles of honor made our shame glaring in their incongruous context of helplessness. Mahatma Gandhi likewise returned his wartime medals. The moderate hope of reforming the empire from within had died in that garden. The illusion of a just empire had vanished. For the Indian leadership, the goal was no longer the reform of British rule, but its total and absolute end. The trauma of that day forged a new kind of revolutionary. Shortly after the shooting, a 12-year-old boy ran to the bog and collected the blood-soaked soil in a glass vial. He kept that vial as a reminder of his oath to free his country. His name was Bhagat Singh. Another man, Udham Singh, spent 21 years hunting Michael O'Dwyer, the governor who had authorized Dyer's actions. He traveled the world under false names, biding his time until he could reach the heart of the empire. On March 13, 1940, Udham Singh finally found his opening at a meeting inside London's Caxton Hall. Singh pulled a revolver from a hollowed-out book and shot O'Dwyer dead. He stood his ground and surrendered to the police, telling the court that he had waited 21 years to settle the debt of his people. The physical scars of the massacre remain visible in the brickwork of Amritsar today. They serve as a silent witness to the 10 minutes that changed everything. The British fired into Jallianwala Bagh to instill permanent submission. Instead, the massacre became the exact moment the British Empire signed its own death warrant in India, turning a peaceful population into the force that would eventually bring the empire